Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to episode 8 of the series where I read different horror subgenres. As you guys can tell by the title, this is Gothic horror this month. So as I start off all of the videos in this series, let's take a moment to learn a little bit more about Gothic horror and some common themes and elements that you see present in the genre. Gothic horror is a subgenre of horror that has grown from a base of romantic writing, meaning that most often in Gothic horror, the writing is focused on human emotions and passions. Gothic horror is also marked by its common themes of hauntings, philosophy, death, religion, sex, and morality. The term Gothic stems from a style of European architecture that was popular in the Middle Ages. Think of huge, decaying, crumbling castles. Generally, aesthetics and atmosphere is a large part of Gothic tales. The atmosphere tends to be claustrophobic, dark, and brooding. Children's librarian Amanda Pagan states in her article, A Brief History of Gothic Horror, the battle between humanity and unnatural forces of evil, sometimes man-made, sometimes supernatural, within an oppressive, inescapable, and bleak landscape is considered to be the true trademark of a Gothic horror novel. Gothic horror itself is a genre that branches off into other subgenres. Unfortunately, I can't delve into everything here, but I found a lot of fascinating information about the history and evolution of Gothic fiction while filming this video, so I would highly recommend doing further research if this is something that interests you. So hopefully now we know a little bit more about the subgenre and some common themes that we might see in these books. To get into the TBR, I have 3 books that I'll be picking up from the library for this. The first one is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. The next one is Where the Dead Wait by Allie Wilkes, Starling House by Alex E. Harrow, and off of my own physical TBR is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So that is the TBR for this video. I'm very, very excited. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it, starting with book number 1. So I'm here just for a quick little update. I've been listening to Mexican Gothic on audio. I decided to start with this one. I know this was a really popular one. I think this was on Book Talk for a while, and it's also, I think, one that's been read by a lot of people, not necessarily just horror readers. So I read Silver Nitrate by the same author earlier this year, and I gave it 2 stars. I really didn't like it. And this is not one that I really ever wanted to pick up. I don't know why. It was just one that, like, I saw it everywhere, but I had no interest in reading it. Honestly, I think it's because I don't like the cover, and so that's why I was like, I don't want to read that book. But we're reading it. It's got Gothic in the title. We're reading it for Gothic horror, so here we are. I didn't quite think that through. I was gonna stand up and hold the freaking camera for the whole time I did this update. No, I'm tired. My arm is tired. It's been like 2 seconds. Anyways, so far we have Noemi, and she gets this letter. Her father gets this letter from, I think it's her cousin. Yes, her cousin Catalina. I'm trying to remember this from like the audio because I haven't been looking at it to read the names, so I just have to listen in my head. She gets this letter from her cousin, and it's very like frantic and disorienting. Like, she's saying that she's being poisoned by her husband, that there's a lot of sinister things going on in her house, there are people in the walls. So Noemi decides to travel there to see what's really going on and to see if there's anything that they can do for Catalina, because the husband's very adamant, like, against putting her in a psychiatric hospital or sending her home or doing anything like that. Like, the husband wants her to stay there. He's like, no, it's fine, it's chill, she's getting better. But Noemi and her father are very suspicious, so she travels there just to kind of scope it out, report back to her dad, and be like, you know, this is what's going on. Like, yes, she's fine, or no, she's not fine, she needs to go to a hospital. So she's there, and the whole thing is just a very strange situation. Like, the staff are very cold towards Noemi, and there's definitely things that you can tell that they are hiding from her, and they don't want her to be alone with Catalina. And Catalina herself is speaking to Noemi at one point and says, like, they're listening. The people in the walls are listening to us. So it's very, very intriguing so far, but I feel like now I'm about 55% of the way through, and I think it's kind of losing some steam a little bit. Like, I want some more things to pick up. We are learning a lot about the history of the family and the history of this house and this town that they are in and the different people and strange occurrences that have happened over the years. So I'm curious to see where it goes. I don't have a lot of thoughts about it right now. I am about to go on a little walk and continue listening to the audiobook, so I'll let you know how far I get into it later. Right now it's really not doing anything crazy for me, so I'll update you. We'll see if that changes. I took my walk, I came home, I took a shower, I washed my hair, hence this. But I managed to get like 78% of the way through Mexican Gothic now. I'm definitely listening to the audiobook a lot quicker than I normally listen to audiobooks. Normally I put it on 2 times speed, and I think right now I'm listening to this one on like 2.2 because I don't know, the way the narrator does it, like I can speed it up and still understand what she's saying. So that's why I'm getting through this book so quickly. But in the physical copy, that is page 235. So we're this far into the book. There has been an interesting development, and I'm just going to describe it as interesting because I'm not 100% sure right now how I feel towards it. I don't know if it's something that I like or something that I kind of dislike, but it's interesting, and I think I'm definitely more intrigued in the story. I'm more intrigued in the story and like where it's going to go now. I think things are definitely picking up, and we got a little bit of insight into certain things that are happening. Our main character, this whole time that she's been there, she's been having, really strange experiences, and she's been having hallucinations and dreams, but that line between dream and reality is becoming blurred, and she doesn't know if her dreams are actually dreams. And I'm not the biggest fan of dream sequences in books. Doesn't matter what the book is, like that's just always been something that I'm not really a fan of. I've learned about myself, so that's why I feel like this book was kind of beginning to drag a little bit for me, but then we got this nice little reveal that kicked things back up. So I'm very curious to see. I'm going to finish it on audio tomorrow, so tonight I'm going to put it down. I will see you guys tomorrow when I finish it. I am enjoying it. I would say it definitely has that Gothic feel to it, with this large estate, this large house, and in the story the house itself is sort of a character as well and has like personality, and without giving too much away, I really like that. So it's going well. It's definitely checking the boxes for Gothic so far. I mean, with a title like that, how could it not, right? And this is definitely going better than the last book that I read by this author, so I think that's a good sign. I finished Mexican Gothic on audio actually a couple of days ago, and I just never sat down to give my final update, my final review. And I think maybe that's a good thing because when I finished it, I know I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to. Not that I necessarily expected to dislike it. I feel like I didn't have very high hopes or high expectations going into it. So to have really enjoyed it, I was like, this was really good. This is 4 stars. But now that it's been a few days, I really haven't thought about the book since finishing it. So I think I'm going to give it 3.5 stars instead of 4 stars. But I still enjoyed it, and it's kind of hard to give a review because like what I enjoyed about the book was the reveal and the twist and that type of thing, which obviously I can't talk about because that spoils the entire story. But I will say, like, I did like that. I like where the book went in the second half when things started to pick up. I like how everything wrapped up in the story and how everything was sort of resolved. And I just think that there were some really interesting and unique elements that came in, and the story itself is very unique. I liked Noemi as a main character. I think she was very strong-willed, and I think throughout everything that was thrown at her in this story, she still made very reasonable decisions. You know, it wasn't one of those stories where it's like this person in this horror movie, in this horror book, is making really dumb decisions, and that, I feel like, didn't happen. Like, our main character was smart, was strong, and stayed strong till the end with what she knew needed to happen and making that happen, even though there's constantly people around her that are kind of trying to put her down and stop her from doing what she's trying to do. Overall, I really liked it. Like I said, I'm giving it 3.5 stars, and I definitely think this was a good one to start off the video with for Gothic horror, because it really does encapsulate a lot of elements that are common within Gothic horror, with like the atmosphere, the house that we're in. Also, I feel like the period, like the setting as well, added to that, and then these other elements that happened that I can't talk about too much, but I really liked it. Now we can move on to book number 2. There's a bunch of kids screaming outside. They're not being kidnapped or murdered. They're just insane. So, pardon if there's any background noise. I do apologize. Anyways, I'm reading Starling House. I started this yesterday, and I'm just about halfway through now. I just made it to chapter 17. First of all, can we take a moment for this cover? Because this cover's gorgeous. This cover alone, I almost bought this book just based off of the cover a little while ago, and then I decided not to because I was like, it's not on my TBR. I don't know if it's a book I'll like, so I should be responsible and not just buy things because they look pretty. But it is gorgeous. So far, I'm really enjoying it. This is more of a fantasy horror, and I feel like it's very similar to our last read with Mexican Gothic, where the house, Starling House itself, has a personality and is a character in the story, which I think is so fun. So we are following this girl, Opal. I'm getting better at remembering character names. So Opal is struggling. Her mother passed away. Her father, I don't think did her father die, or he's just really like never been, no, he's not dead, but he's just like a deadbeat. He's never been in their lives. So she is taking care of her younger brother, Jasper. She is in her 20s. I think she said she was like 26, and Jasper is 16 years old. Their mother passed away, and they are living in a motel. The only reason that they are able to live in this motel is because when their mother was alive, they made a deal with the owner of the motel, so they are allowed to stay there rent-free, but it's still very difficult. She doesn't have a vehicle. She has to walk like 4 miles to work. She doesn't get paid very well, and pretty much all of her money goes to Jasper, making sure that he has everything he needs and everything that he wants, especially for school. She really wants him to succeed, and she knows that he has a lot of goals that are outside of this town. They live in a small town called Eden, Kentucky. So that's where we're at with Opal. Also in this town is Starling House, which is this large Gothic mansion, and it's kind of got this lore behind it, this mystery behind it, because one of the most famous owners that lived there was a woman called Eleanor Starling, and she was the author of this children's book that was called The Undertale, and it was this very gothic, creepy, nightmarish children's book with these crazy illustrations. It was really, really famous. That's the only book that this woman ever published, and then shortly after, she pretty much just disappeared. So there's a lot of rumors in the town, and that's what a lot of this book is building up the story and the lore behind this. We are getting different versions of different stories of Starling House and the people that live there and the town and the families that are involved with this and the history. This book is really doing a lot to set the mood and kind of give you that background. There are a lot of like footnotes in here as well. They're not quite my favorite because I think not every single footnote is really necessary to the story. I mean, they're kind of little interesting tidbits to, like I said, provide a little bit more background, but I don't think that they're all completely needed, and it kind of takes away from the story itself. But Opal has always been infatuated with this book, this author, and this house, and she constantly dreams of this house. And so one day she's walking home from work, she passes by the house, and she sees somebody there, the sole occupant that is there at that current moment, and he offers her a job cleaning. She takes it because obviously it's closer to the motel and it's going to be a lot better pay, and it's this house she's been like obsessed with, so of course she's going to take any opportunity to get inside of it. But now that she's working there, there is a lot of things being revealed, but also the mystery is getting deeper because a lot of people that have found out that she is working there want certain things from her and want her to do certain things now. So it's getting dark and dangerous, and now a lot of the fantasy elements are really coming into it, but I'm really enjoying it. I think the atmosphere is great. I'm excited for where the like fantasy elements, I don't want to give too much away, but I feel like there's a lot of like really interesting setup that has happened, and I'm excited, but I'm a little bit nervous for the second half because I feel like right now I don't really have strong feelings towards the book, so it really depends on what else is going to happen and how the story is going to wrap up. That's really going to decide how I feel about it. But it's going well. It's definitely checking the boxes for Gothic horror, and I'm really liking it. So I just finished Starling House literally just a couple of minutes ago, so I just wanted to sit down and give you guys my final thoughts before I go to bed. I really enjoyed this. Honestly, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. This is, like I told you guys, a dark fantasy. It's like a fantasy horror, but it's also got romance in it, just a little bit. And it's really also about these two characters and different things that they've gone through in their lives. So obviously Opal, our main character, I told you guys about all of the things that she's dealing with in her life, all of the hardships and just a really tough life she's had thus far and is continuing to have, but trying to make something out of it. And then this person that she meets at Starling House, his name is Arthur, and he's got a lot going on as well that comes into the story. He, being in the family that he's a part of, he kind of has this path that it seems like he is destined to follow because everybody before him has followed in the same path, and it's really about, you know, is that what's going to happen for him? Is he going to be that person that breaks the chain and breaks out of this cycle? And the two of them coming together, it is about belonging, finding a sense of home and like a found family type of aspect. And then the writing on top of it was just exquisite. The atmosphere was exquisite, and overall I really enjoyed it, and I like where the story went. I like the way that things unraveled. I think it was really an interesting way to tell the story as well. Like I said, it's like a collected history of this town, of this house, and of the people that are involved, and then, you know, we have these footnotes and different edits that are made to the story, which is kind of fun. So it made for a really interesting and a quite delightful read. So I'm really happy that I read it. I don't know what I want to rate it yet. I know it'll probably be at least a 4, but I don't know if it'll be higher than that, if I want to give it a 4.5 or maybe even a 5. I don't know. I'm gonna wait and let my thoughts really sink in and see how I feel over the next few days. One thing for me, like, if I'm ever questioning if a book is 5 stars, all I have to do is wait, and if that book stays in my mind for days to weeks after I read it, then I know it's 5 stars. So I'm gonna let this one sink in, but it was really good, and I'm really happy to be sitting here and saying that. New day, new book. I've been listening to Where the Dead Wait by Ali Wilkes on audio today. I decided to start it, and I got about 30% of the way through, which in the physical copy is page 117 where I'm at. So this is Oh, it's only 385 pages. It feels like it's longer than that. Like, I feel like this book is like over 400 pages, but it's not, apparently. I'm really excited that I'm getting to read this because it was on my TBR on Goodreads for a while. I think even before it was published, I had it added on there. The synopsis sounds really, really interesting, and it is described as a polar Gothic because it takes place in the Arctic. This is the late 1800s. We have this main character, William Day, and he was on this expedition, this ship, that things went terribly wrong. People died, and in order to survive, they resorted to cannibalism. And he was the person in charge at the time that these acts were committed, and so he eventually gets back, but it's very controversial. There's no guarantee that he's going to be given work again or sent out onto any expeditions again. A lot of people are making a lot of harsh judgments. There's a lot of rumors and different things about what happened on that expedition, his judgment in making the decisions that he did, and if there was intentional murder committed in order for them to cannibalize people, and it's just very controversial. A lot of people don't like him because of the decisions that were made on that expedition. So now he has been sent out on sort of a recovery mission to search for this other guy that has gone missing in the Arctic. I think his name is, Jesse. I know something with a J. So Jesse Stevens, his second in command, has gone missing in the same frozen waters. This is 13 years after that failed expedition. So now he's out there searching for this guy, and he's got a crew of people with him. One of the people that is with him is this man's wife, Jesse's wife, and she is a medium. So she does seances. She is very connected to the spiritual world. So that's definitely a big part of it, and it's interesting. I think the premise is really, really interesting. I think so far I'm not the biggest fan of the writing. It feels very overwritten at times. I feel like there are a lot of details and a lot of things that are being brought into the story that aren't entirely essential, and it's kind of making me zone out at times and get a little lost with the plot and like what's actually happening. There's just a lot. So part one, I will say I was kind of struggling a little bit to get through because I was like, I don't know if I fully understand everything that's happening. But on page 95, we go into part two, which I'm currently in, and I think it's definitely picking up. My intrigue is growing. Now we are getting more into these paranormal aspects, the horror aspects of it all. The whole book goes back and forth between the present day and then what happened in the past, and the events leading up to this cannibalism that we know occurred. But in the present day, on the ship that they're on, there is a haunting occurring where there are strange presences being seen and heard and felt, and it's getting a little bit dangerous at times. So they know that something is there, but they don't know who it is, what it is, where it came from, what it wants. So obviously this lady that performs seances is going to come into that and I think help out with creating this connection between whatever this spirit is and them, and figuring out why that spirit is with them. So it's interesting. I'm not 100% sure how to feel. Like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of the writing, but I am more interested in where the story's going in part two. It's definitely picking up, so I'm curious to see where it goes from here. I think I'll continue to listen to it on audio. I think that's just working really well for me. Anyway, that's where I'm at for today with this one. So I will let you guys know when I have another update. So I am back to say that I finished Where the Dead Wait. I didn't give you guys any more updates while I was reading the book because I honestly wasn't having a good time. This book was really like a roller coaster for me. Like, it was down and then up for a little bit, and then it went down again, and then it went up a little bit, and then it went down again. And like, I just don't really know how to even sit here and like give you guys a review of this book, because it was very difficult to follow the story. We have this dual timeline, like I told you guys about, but in each timeline we get our main character, but then we also get the other guy, Jesse Stevens, that he's looking for, but he's also was on the expedition in the past. And then they have this other crew with them, and it was just, I feel like, very difficult to keep track of like what timeline we were in and which crew was with which timeline. And there were points where hopefully this doesn't give too much away, but the ghost of Jesse was in one timeline, but then the real Jesse was in the other timeline, and I was getting a little bit confused. And with the whole plot being like that they were trying to find this guy, I was like, oh my god, like, are we in the present timeline? And like they found him. And I thought that it was just myself. Like, this book made me doubt my confidence. I was like, maybe I'm just not paying attention because I'm listening to it on audio, so like maybe I'm just like zoning out, which definitely happened a few times. But I know I'm not crazy because pretty much every low rating for this book, low review, talks about this, like it being difficult to follow the different timelines and all the different characters. So that makes me feel a little bit better about myself. Overall, I'm giving this book 2.5 stars because although I didn't enjoy the writing and I didn't enjoy the way the story was told and really what happened in the story, I can appreciate some of the great horror elements that was in it. It got gruesome and dark at times. The ghostly apparitions and events that happened with them were, I think, described very well and were very spooky. The atmosphere was there with them being out in the Arctic. And I can definitely see somewhere buried in here is a good story. And if you're one of those people that can read it and you can dig to that good story and enjoy this book, I'm really happy for you. And that's why I'm not rating it lower, because like I know that there's people out there who are going to enjoy this. And it's really funny. I'm going to give a recommendation, which is just kind of funny because I think I would recommend it to people that really liked The Fisherman by John Langan. I love that book. That was a 5-star book for me. That's like a new all-time favorite horror. And I hated Where the Dead Wait, but I feel like if you liked one, you could possibly like the other. And I don't really have a reasoning for that, honestly. So, as a parting thought, I just want to share with you some quotes from Goodreads. This review was from Marissa. She gave it 2 stars, and she said, 400 pages of sad, gay, cannibal hallucinating. There you go. That's the whole book. And you know, that's true. Kelly also gave it 2 stars, and she said, haunting ambience that set the scene for a story where I asked, what is happening? Which character is that? What timeline am I in the whole way through? Because that was me, and I thought I was crazy, but I'm not crazy. Other people felt the same way. So, on to the next book. Hopefully it goes better than this one. Lil is joining us. Oh, never mind, she's not joining us anymore. Good evening. I am reading Rebecca currently. I started this yesterday. First of all, I want to say that I don't know if this book would necessarily count for the horror part of this video, but it is a classic and it is one of the biggest or like most commonly mentioned books when referencing Gothic literature. So I figured it makes sense to include it. It's been on my TBR. It's also on my specific 2024 TBR, so I wanted to use this chance to be able to read it, and I'm really excited. I have seen the 2020 remake of the movie. I did not watch the original movie yet, so I kind of had an idea of what the story was. I know like what the kind of twist is in the book and generally how it plays out, but I will say I see a lot of criticism of that specific version of the movie for being more romantic than the book and coming off as like a romance. And now that I'm reading this, I definitely understand those criticisms and I do agree with that. I think it's very clear within the story here that Max is not a good partner and he's definitely got his flaws, and I think it's very obvious that he has chosen this woman because she's young and naive and doesn't know a lot of things, and in a way is like easy to kind of manipulate and toss around within his world. I guess before I get too far into it, I should let you know kind of what the story's about if you've never heard of this. This was written in 1938, and this is pretty much about this young woman, a nameless main character, and she meets Max de Winter. They have a kind of chance meeting and very quickly are infatuated with each other. They get married, and he brings her to his home of Manderley, which is the name of the house. It's this very, very large mansion. And when she's there, she knows that his wife died a year prior. Her name was Rebecca, but once she gets to the home, it becomes very obvious, like, the lasting impact that Rebecca has had, and the way that people felt about her was very positive, and it's very clear that in everything she does, people are comparing her to Rebecca. So she kind of falls into this obsession with Rebecca, her new husband's ex-wife, and the story just evolves from there, and I don't want to give too much away. I'm having a great time with this. I had a feeling that I was going to love it before reading it, and I knew pretty quickly that, like, I'm loving this book. Like, I'm pretty confident. I would say probably about 50 to 60 pages in, I am confident that this is a 5-star. I am now 152 pages in, and I still feel that way. The first thing that I noticed about this book was the descriptiveness of everything, the way that the scenes are described in such detail. I feel like you can just picture the setting so perfectly, and there's so much detail within the writing, which has been great. And Manderley itself, once again, like one of those stories where the house is like a character in the book, but it's just described so well, and it just is giving me this feeling of longing. Like, I wish I could go to Manderley and explore this mansion and the land that it's on. It just sounds so fascinating and beautiful, and I think that's how I would describe this book as a whole so far. Just fascinating and beautiful, and it really pulls you in, and I'm really, really enjoying it. So, like I said, I don't know if this could necessarily count. I mean, it depends who you ask if they want to call it a horror or not. I would say it leans more mystery thriller than a straight up horror, but it is interesting because it does have some gothic horror elements to it in terms of like a haunting. But it's interesting because our main character, in a way, is being haunted by Rebecca, but not physically. Like, Rebecca's not a ghost. Yes, she's dead, but it's not paranormal. It's just this haunting that our main character has essentially created through her obsession with this woman. And I think this quote on the back of the book sums it up perfectly. Rebecca is dead, and yet she influences every action and thought of all other characters in the book. And I feel like that's very obvious, and it just really has been such an interesting read so far. And our main character as well, I feel like, is such an interesting character to follow because she is so young. Max, her husband, is significantly older. It's really funny because when they meet, and she's working for this other woman at the time that they meet, and is getting ready eventually to travel again with this woman, and then, you know, obviously Max is gonna go return home to Manderley, so they have to say goodbye, and she's just like picturing every scenario in her head of how their goodbye will go, and then picturing like their marriage and picturing them having kids, and just coming up with these scenarios inside of her brain that I feel like is so entertaining and a little bit relatable. Also, the way that, because she is so young and grew up very differently than this, she's not very wealthy. She's kind of had a poor life, and so she's very out of place with Max and in Manderley, and it's really interesting to see the way that affects her, and how she's very timid and doesn't want to like step out of her boundaries, and I think that just like adds to her obsession with Rebecca, because Rebecca was obviously the total opposite of that, like a wealthy woman, a woman that's used to having power and, you know, directing the staff and organizing different things throughout the home. So I think it's just really interesting. So we're really just in her head, and it's also an interesting narration because we start off the story with our main character telling us like something happened. This is her reflecting on what has happened now that it has passed. So it's interesting because we get to see like her kind of thoughts. Like we get to see the present day, her telling us like what happened day to day, but then we also get to see her thoughts reflecting back on that from a future perspective, which is very interesting. Safe to say, it's going well. I think this is definitely one of those classics that you read and you're like, yeah, this is a classic for a reason, and I think is definitely deserves the hype that it gets, and I'm loving it so far. So right now I'm gonna go to bed because it's pretty late, and I will keep reading this tomorrow. I'm really, really excited to read this. It's been so good so far. I'm still reading Rebecca. Today is actually the day that I'm going to upload this video, so pretty much my entire goal for the day is just to finish this. I have just gotten to chapter 20, which is about 300 pages in, so I only have like 130 pages left to read, so really not long at all. But I just got to the part where we had our reveal, our twist, and I know I told you guys like I have seen the movie, the remake, before reading this. I saw it a couple of years ago, I think, and so I kind of know the story, and I know like the twists and the reveal and like what's really happening. But if I hadn't known that, like if I had no prior knowledge going into this book, like that reveal would have hit so hard. Like I can just imagine how shocked I would be. My jaw would drop. I would be like, what is going on? And I think that really shows, like, aside from being a classic and having beautiful writing and all of these like metaphors within the story and within the writing, I think it just goes to show that the mystery, like thriller part of it itself is really, really good, because like I feel like that's definitely a twist that you wouldn't see coming. And I just kind of wish like I could erase the story from my brain and read this book for the first time and just be shocked and blown away by that, because it's so good. So I'm still having a really great time with this. There is a lot of like different passages that I like. I've been taking pictures. I have to go back and add tabs on a few parts, and I think once I finish this book, maybe I'll share some of those pieces with you guys, some of the things that I really liked. But like I said, my only goal for the day, aside from finishing this video and uploading it, is to finish the book before I can finish the video. So you guys will see me later once I finish it. It's going great. It's definitely going to be a 5-star. Like, I don't even think I have to finish reading the book to sit here and say this is a 5-star read, but I'm gonna finish it anyways, obviously. So I will see you guys later. So here I am back to wrap up the video. I have just finished Rebecca. I've already told you guys this is getting 5 stars from me. It's one of those books, like I said, it's a classic for a reason. There are so many things that I could sit here and talk about within this book, like different metaphors and deeper meanings to things that are written and how it plays into the story and the characters. It is a book that was entirely captivating from the very beginning to the very, very end, to the very last page. And I think this is also one that, like, I just loved being in the world. I loved being in Manderley, and I loved being with these characters, especially the descriptive writing really, really added to that. And I feel like if this was 500 pages longer, I would still give it a 5-star book, just because I was enjoying reading it and just being in the story was just so great. I think I said it in the first update I did of this book, where I described it as fascinating and beautiful, and I still feel like those are two very good words to sum up the experience and the story that we get. So I only had a few things tabbed because when I started this book, that wasn't something I was thinking about. If I was thinking from the beginning, like, I'm gonna have my tabs ready, I'm gonna have my highlighter ready, whatever, I feel like there would definitely be a lot more annotations. So I think if I were to reread this in the future, I would definitely add a lot more tabs. But I just tabbed some things that I liked the way that they were worded. I liked different passages and the things that they make you think about. There's a little bit thought-provoking, and I was gonna share like some of my favorite quotes or favorite passages as like a closing thought to this video, but I feel like reading back on them now out of context, it doesn't really make sense, so I'm not going to do that. But overall, this was a fantastic read. If you haven't read this one yet, I would highly recommend it. And that brings us to the end of this video. So clearly we had some good ones. We only had one that didn't work so well, Where the Dead Wait, which was 2.5 stars. But generally, everything went pretty well, and I almost feel like this might be my favorite episode that I've done for this series, just because, I mean, this book alone. Also, Starling House, I ended up giving 4.5 stars in the end, and that one is really standing out to me in both of these for the beautiful writing within them, and I feel like I got to experience a lot of great literature this week, so it's been a great time. As usual, if you've made it this far, you guys get to know what the next installment will be. So October is a very, very busy reading month for me, and originally I had planned to do occult as the subgenre, but there are so many different categories that branch off of occult, and I just had a hard time really building a TBR and figuring out what I wanted to do for that. So instead, for October, I will just be reading books that are set on or around Halloween. I have 6 books on my TBR for that. So it's sort of October's installment to this series, but not necessarily, because I wouldn't really call that a subgenre. But hopefully I will see you guys there. If you didn't know, I'm doing a readathon in October, so go to my channel and get all the details and join me, and it'll be a great time. With all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you next time.